What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. A lot of stuff to play today. We got Outer Worlds, Call of Duty. I know I'm definitely checking out the Outer Worlds today. I'm really excited for it, but I might also take a look at Call of Duty's campaign somewhat as well before the podcast. That's tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So we can talk a bit about both of those games. And I guess let me know what you're playing over the weekend here, especially as we head into the holidays and a lot of games starting to drop. Like I said, we have Outer Worlds out today that looks amazing. But today we have to go over some of the gaming news that was kind of depressing, actually. There was some sad news, to be honest, that happened yesterday. We had a delay for a big Sony first-party game. We had Ubisoft just collapse during their earnings report and everything, and next year just got really shuffled around big time for them. But we did also see a patent for a revised Switch Pro Controller. A lot of stuff to go over today, guys. As always, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to like button. It does help out. And get subscribed so you can stay up to date on all of the gaming news going on in the gaming world. And we're going to start today with Persona 5 Scramble. Now, we did see this unveiled before, of course, and it looked okay. I mean, it sounded like it was going to be a Dynasty Warriors style game, but we got a new trailer that showed all of gameplay and some different elements, and we got a release date for Japan. Now, we don't really know when it's going to come westward. We're not really sure, but the thing about that, of course, is we have some region-free systems, whether it's like the Switch or I guess even the PlayStation 4. You can just download them and play it. It's also going to depend on if it has any English options. I assume it won't, so you might want to make sure you can read up on some Japanese text and everything. Otherwise, we'll have to hopefully not wait too much longer, but the trailer looked awesome. They showed some really cool stuff there. There's more here than I originally thought, and I think a lot of people thought. I mean, they did show kind of the action combat. It's action RPG, of course, but they also showed some platforming. They had fully animated cutscenes, even some new social events. This looks like Persona 5 just action RPG style. So I'm looking forward to it. The release date that we have right now is February 20th, 2020, of course, so not too long, at least in Japan, and then I'm hoping it's only a couple of months later and we'll get a release date for the rest of the world, and then hopefully it can make it out everywhere else in 2020 as well, but looking a lot better than I thought a lot of people were originally thinking. I mean, a lot of people I saw kind of wrote it off because it wasn't an announcement for Persona 5 on other platforms, but for what I'm seeing here, this looks really fun. We also had an announcement from Techland that Call of Juarez Gunslinger is coming to the Switch. We had talked about this previously, so we were kind of expecting this to happen. Remember, we saw a rating and everything for it, so this isn't too surprising, but this is the Call of Juarez game that came out in 2013 on the 360 and the PS3 that people really seem to like, and I think a lot of that has to do with it the series kind of going into current times, and then they went back to the old times. That seemed to really make people happy with it, and it does look like Square is actually publishing it. They're adding in gyro controllers for the Switch, and it's coming out at, I think, a pretty good time for a game like this that is really a port of an older game from last generation, December 10th. So it's going to be a couple weeks before Christmas and everything, but I think about 10 days into December is going to give it a nice spot for nothing else really around it that you can spend money on that comes out at that time. So I think a good spot, I would say, at least for the release, and we'll see how it plays and everything, but throwing in gyro controls and just moving another shooter over to the Switch is a good idea. Oh, and check this out. Do you remember Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks? I love that game. That was such a good game. I played it on the original Xbox all the time with a few friends because you could do co-op, of course, through it. And it was just a really fun action beat-em-up style game. And it was really cool because you'd unlock fatalities and all this. It was really, really fun. But we really haven't been able to play it much since it came out on the original Xbox, where I played it back in the day and on the PS2 as well. However, it appears that Ed Boon is interested in doing something with it. This is actually what he had to say during a Q&A with the Brazil Game Show. We've talked about doing remasters of some of the older games. You know, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks was one of the ones that have been asked for doing a remastered version, and we're thinking of it. Ed Boon continues, "We have nothing to announce, but it would be something we'd like to see. I would like to see that. Ed, you need to do it. This would be awesome, even if it was just a port and a basic remaster. To be honest, at this point, even if you can make it backwards compatible with the Xbox One, which doesn't appear to be happening as they've moved on to the Xbox Scarlet at this point, I think if you can just do a straight remaster, move it to all the platforms, current platforms, PS4, Xbox One, the Switch, even a PC, just like a fully remastered version of it, that would be awesome. And it would be really cool even if you threw some online play in there for people who want to do co-op and everything, so that all works. I like that idea. I like their mindset, but it's going to come down to, is WB going to look at that and think that it's worth doing? I hope so, because I want it. And guys, some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start with Last of Us Part 2. It has been delayed. All right, so it seems strange, but remember we talked about this yesterday for an unexpected Sony announcement to take place, and the only thing that I could think of if something was getting delayed was Last of Us, because what else would get delayed? We don't know a date for Ghost of Tsushima, which, by the way, that's going to fall further into 2020 because now Last of Us Part 2 is being moved to May 29th. So a couple of months later from its original release date at the end of February. This was, I think, a strange thing to hear about considering they just gave us the release date at the end of February, had a bunch of press come in and play it, like hours of playtime. A lot of them went home with half an hour or more that they could show in a video even while they talked over it, but it has to get delayed. Very, very strange. However, we did have a very large, just a massive blog post. Here's just a quick shot of it here. And that's, of course, from Neil Druckmann talking a bit about some of the issues they ran into as they started to kind of finish up, wrap things up, and realize that they needed more time to deliver the polish that Naughty Dog would want to do. Like, they really don't want to put out a product that is going to, in their mind, hurt the quality of the game just because they want to rush it to get to a certain deadline. I do think they would even say this, that it was a mistake to announce that February release date. And remember, if you looked at that God of War, we had that God of War documentary. During that, we saw them move their own release date back. So this isn't uncommon necessarily to Sony's first-party games, but I will say this. We've been waiting for Last of Us Part 2 for a long, long time. It's been a while, right? It's been what? It came out 2013, so it's been about 6 years, right? 7 years just about, actually. So for me, if we gotta wait another couple months so that it is that much better and it's polished, yeah, I'd rather do that. I'd rather not have a Fallout 76 situation like we're dealing with now, or an Anthem situation, or any of these games where they come out. I know there's live services, this is not, but it comes out and it's broken or there's issues, and then we just get this 20 gigabyte patch, and what do we always say? It wasn't ready to launch, it wasn't ready to sell for $60. I prefer them to say, hey, you know what? We want to make sure it's really good because we want to earn your money. We're going to delay it. I'm okay with that. Also, there's a lot of stuff to play. People started pointing out to me, and I didn't even think of this because we're still in 2019 mindset where we still have some other games coming up. But that game was going to come out 3 or 4 days before Final Fantasy VII Remake? And I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking, wait, that game is 2 weeks away from something like, we got Doom Eternal coming out later on, then we have Animal Crossing. I started thinking, man, you know what? Maybe it's not a bad idea to move that to May, just because I would have been busy with so much stuff right away. I feel like I would have had to have rushed through it, but now I'm also thinking, what else could be coming out around that time? Because we might end up in that same situation, but at the end of May, leading into E3, not a bad spot to have it come out, and you know what? Take the time, because I want a really good game. Next up, let's talk about this new Nintendo Switch Pro Controller revision, or at least a patent for revision. This is a very strange thing to see. Now, Japanese Nintendo posted about this and reported on it, and even showed several pictures that you're seeing here, and based on the description with a very rough translation that I could come up with on the site, it appears that they are pointing to those grips on the controller. Even several of the diagrams do show it disassembled completely, but I went through the patent and it looks like it's still the same, except for the one thing that they are pointing at, which are those grips on either side. So if you look at your Pro Controller, you'll notice that the grips are pretty obvious that they're separate from the main body of the controller, and there's one screw on the bottom of each one to just pop those off. They show them in the same diagrams in the patent, and during which they seem to describe that they're going to be changing them in some way so that it's just better to use, basically. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, does that mean that they'll change the texture of the grip? Is that possible? Will they make it more flush with the main body itself? And I don't think this is going to be something that they even necessarily announce. This could just be a Pro Controller they put out in the wild. It has maybe a little change on the back for revision, but then people start buying it and they say, wait a minute, these grips are like rubberized plastic, basically, right? We could see something like that. You could see maybe a different design with different maybe small dots all the way around it that have a better grip feeling. Maybe we see it and there's literally no gap between the bottom part and the main base. There are a lot of things that could happen here, but I will say this. It's not going to be like this brand new Pro Controller that comes out that looks radically different or anything crazy. Nothing like that. It's going to come out. The grips will probably feel better than what we've been dealing with recently, which, I mean, they're not bad, but they're plastic. Like, you know, it doesn't have any type of texture or feeling to it that's really that great. I would like that. Like a rubberized, I think, texture would be nice. It would feel better in the hands, and that's at least what it seems like they're describing. An improvement over an already existing design, but they do specifically keep pointing to those grips, so I don't think it's all of a sudden going to change the overall look of it, just those grips on the bottom. Next up, let's talk about Ubisoft, because they had a rough day yesterday. I mean, it was not good. They put out a ton of financial statements and everything, and it looks like they are really struggling right now with some of their releases. They put this, for example, here's the first page that you see when you open up the document. It says that there is an issue specifically with Ghost Recon Breakpoint and Division 2. They say that there was a sharp downward revision in the revenues expected due to those two games. Less so Division 2, more so Ghost Recon Breakpoint. They say that they just underwhelmed heavily when it comes to the amount of revenue that they were expecting, and that's kind of a shame. I mean, here's the thing about Ubisoft. We've talked about this before. They have fallen in love with the games as a service mindset. That's what they want to turn their games into, and that's why something seems, anyway, like Splinter Cell, why that doesn't exist. It is very, very strange. Although I guess in their mind, they're like, well, if one of our games as a service works, that means they can all work as that. But they don't really seem to account for the fact that people have limited amounts of time and they want you to log into these games like every single day. So are you going to log into Division 2 and then you're going to turn around and log into Rainbow Six Siege, and then you're going to log in to, they're going to log in at that point to Watch Dogs, and so on and so on. That's what they seem to want, but they're kind of forgetting that, hey, you know what? Sometimes you just make a game, you sell it, you move on. Maybe you do some DLC. I don't know. But that is kind of a problem that they seem to be running into, and also trying to get people to move from like the Division 1, the Division 2, and Ghost Recon. They said that they believe they released Breakpoint too close to Wildlands. Like they should have just stuck with Wildlands and keep that going. You know what? Maybe they should have. Maybe Wildlands should have just gone through this entire generation, and instead of focusing on Breakpoint, they should have said, hey, you know what we can do? We can make a fully single-player Splinter Cell and then have a multiplayer aspect to it where it's spies versus mercenaries, and yeah, they probably would have sold 10 million copies of that. You know, that's just... I don't know. They're just enamored with games as a service, and it gets even worse because of the situation now. They're deciding that they want to spend more time on the other games, which tells me that maybe they want to get rid of some of the cookie cutter stuff they've been doing, where you're climbing towers and accessing parts of this very large map that seems pretty empty at times, right? So here's what's happening, because this is also described in this passage you're seeing here. To the decision to increase development time for Gods and Monsters, Rainbow Six Quarantine, and Watch Dogs Legion, which will all now be released in fiscal 2020 to 2021, which means that at the earliest some of these games would launch, I guess, would be starting in April. So Watch Dogs may come out, I'm thinking, in August? Like, it's going to be a bit. And it's strange to hear about this with something like Watch Dogs, although it does appear that there were some issues because they had made their own statement saying we need more time. And it does sound like the scope of what they were looking for is just going to introduce more and more bugs, as they're trying to get to the point where you can take over any character in that city and then bring them in and they have their own life and everything. It really sounds huge, massive, massive undertaking. And now Gods and Monsters, which I thought was one of the more interesting games because it didn't look like games as a service, is also being delayed. And it's tough for Ubisoft. They now have a massive downward push now in their revenue and everything that they're showing. Their stock dropped 16%. It's tough for Ubisoft, but I do think they can recover as long as they kind of take a step back and say, okay, games as a service, how many do we really, really need? Because eventually you get too crowded. You got EA around you, right? Now we have Bethesda with Fallout 76. I think Ubisoft just needs to take a step back, reevaluate, and be a bit more, I guess, careful with which games are actually games of service and how long you make them last, because Rainbow Six Siege has worked. But The Division 2 and Ghost Recon Breakpoint, not so much. And then our last bit of news, I'll leave you guys with something kind of funny leading into the weekend. We talked about Fallout 76 a few times now with Fallout First. We did a video here, of course, when they first announced it with me and just amazement, just disbelief. And I did another video on the second channel, Spawnwave Plus, talking about how it came out, and it was just broken with a ton of bugs and reports and everything. It's a whole thing. But one thing Bethesda seemed to forget to do was to lock down the URL for Fallout, specifically Fallout First, and someone else did it, and they put up a ton of profanity, made fun of it, massive parody site. And the best part about this is they then went and opened a GoFundMe just to fund the website's existence, like literally like server fees and being able to just keep the site up. And that crossed its goal of about $120 without any real issue. So now there is a site that I guess Bethesda can't get unless they can buy it from this person and rip it down, that people will probably type in. I mean, they see Fallout First, they go, oh, okay, yeah, falloutfirst.com, and they run into, well, a bit of an issue. Now, I don't know if Bethesda can do anything about this because, well, they are using some of their trademark images and stuff, and it does make fun of them. It is kind of funny. It has some pretty serious language to it, but it's funny to read through. But it is seemingly someone who was not happy with Fallout First and wanted to make it known by getting the URL and then making this massive website of all kinds of parody-ridden stuff. It really is funny, and I don't know what Bethesda will do about it, but seems like people like it enough to fund its existence. And we'll finish up with our comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This one is from Lore, saying, hopefully this could mean Left 4 Dead 3 or a Switch port, or Valve doing anything that's not a card game. Never mind. So the thing about Valve is I would love to see Left 4 Dead 3, by the way. I would love to see them just make some serious games, although now it sounds like they're going to be doing some VR stuff. Who knows about Valve at this point. There was a time, I promise, there was a time where we would look forward to Valve making a game. Remember E3 2004? They showed up with Half-Life 2 and it blew us away. That was an E3, if I remember right, that had Half-Life 2 and Halo 2. Think about that. That was like mind-blowing then, and we would look forward to it. We'd say, I can't wait to see what Valve was going to show us at E3, because we knew Half-Life 2 was going to be there, and it was exciting. And now we don't have that feeling with Valve anymore. Now, I don't know if they would do another Left 4 Dead, like Left 4 Dead 3. It's been rumored quite a bit, or Half-Life 3, but the year that we hear about that leading into E3 and they surprise us, it's going to feel like the old days, but unfortunately, I don't know if that year will ever come. And ladies and gentlemen, let's go to here for Newswave. Enjoyed this video, guys. Hit the like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, where it's that Pro Controller revision. What do you think they can do to those grips? You think they can add a different kind of texture to them, or maybe make them clip in a bit better? Let me know what you think they might be doing on that one. And then also, what about Last of Us Part 2? Getting delayed? Are you annoyed by it? Or are you like, okay, you know what? There's a lot to play, so I'm all right now. And then Ubisoft. It doesn't look good for them at the end of this generation. What can they do to turn things around going into the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox Scarlet? Thanks guys for watching. Have a great weekend. Play some games, get out there, have some fun, and I'll see you guys back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.